attorneys are going crazy with
Because
this.
there may be something in there.
And the owner of the house is in a hotel.
All right. Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. No sign of Mark. Heard anything wrong?
No, haven't heard from him either.
No, we do have a quorum. We don't have an audience.
TV audience.
I'll ask if anyone's recording. First item on the agenda is meeting minutes. Do we have those?
No, we do not have the meeting minutes completed as yet for the last meeting.
Okay. Next, we have the covenant release for Burgess Point Shores subdivision.
We received correspondence on this from Mr. Rowley. The engineer for the project, SciTech, Steve Joso, had asked for a continuance so he could address the questions, the issues raised by Mr. Rowley. It might be worthwhile to have Charlie go over the findings, summarize them for us at this point, if you're interested.
One question I have is, the intent is, or if it hasn't already happened, is to turn over the remaining property to Coalition for Buzzards Bay?
I don't know who's getting the property. I just know that they were after lot releases. I don't know who's getting what.
Would they,
That was the story, yes.
would they then become a member of the homeowners association?
I would assume that if they own the lots, they are subject to whatever the original agreement was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it matters who owns the property,
That first house going in there is not part of that subdivision, Charlie.
not the first one. But
Right.
when you get up to where the road turns to the right, the house that's on the left, that's a part of it.
Where Canancy used to live?
No, no, right on the corner is Cananzie's lot. Then you go in the development road,
Yeah.
and where it begins to rise and go to the right, over the left, is a brand-new, well, brand-new house. It sits back from the road a little bit. That's on Lot 7.
So is that the only house in the subdivision?
There's one
No,
down the
there's
end of the
another house that's on Lot 4, which is at the end of the cul-de-sac.
So the burden of maintaining this road would fall on two people? If,
Well, and whoever owns the remaining lots, because part of the stipulation of the approval was that they have a homeowners association, and they're responsible for maintaining the road until such time as it becomes a town way. But they also have the responsibility for maintaining the stormwater facilities,
Mhm.
and there was one other thing.
In any event, they will be addressing these shortcomings and getting back to you, I take it?
That's
Yeah,
what we were informed today.
You might want to, did you have a copy of the plan? Does everybody have a copy of the correspondence I sent?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe so.
One of the stipulations of the approval was that street trees be put in every 50 feet. But when you drive that subdivision, and if you, it may be hard to see in the pictures if you've got black and white. Ken, I've got a colored copy here. The entire development is well-treed on both sides, and the trees come in to the edge of what was actually put together as part of the shoulders of the road. The road is well-groomed, it's got good grass growth on both sides, but they don't meet that stipulation of planting street trees 50 feet. In my opinion, they're not needed, given the growth that's there, but it's not compliant with the approval. So I don't know how you want to handle that.
Where would they put them, where would they plant them, Charlie?
Well, typically, they've been planted between the pavement and the sidewalk. It's not a good place to put them because the strip is so narrow.
Yeah, yeah.
And once the roots begin to grow, it either lifts the sidewalk or it does damage to the pavement. It wasn't stipulated, as I recall, I don't know if there's anything on the plan, I can look, as to whether they needed to be planted on the other side of the sidewalk or not. But when you look at it, when you drive and see the conditions there, it just doesn't seem warranted. But I think the only way that you can not require them to do it would be to have a modification of the approval. And since they're after a covenant release, maybe you could do that as a part of the covenant release, but it's the only way you could not expect them to follow through.
Two 2003, huh?
Yeah, it goes back a ways.
A lot of these trees probably were very small then, so they needed trees.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to, myself, to relaxing that condition. but-
We're permitted to do that under the subdivision rules and regulations.
It's like a mature subdivision, which is the intent of street trees.
You'd have to hold a public hearing to do it. But to me, it doesn't make any sense to expect them to plant trees
Even if
when it
we
looks so nice.
considered it a minor, would we consider it a minor change? Because it was,
You could, but there's no provisions in the subdivision regulations for simply taking a vote without a public hearing.
It's a waiver, not a,
yeah. Right. So they'll be getting back to you with the,
response.
very good.
Ken, are those other documents you gave me, are those yours, or did you make copies for me? Do you need them back?
It'd be great if we could get them back.
Okay.
Thank you.
So how are we gonna handle that, Judge?
Hmm?
So we're gonna have a public hearing, modify it.
Correct,
There'd have to be a request by the applicant.
if they wanted to, yeah. Next, we have a discussion on the tripartite agreement with Bay
Wait.
Point.
A couple of questions on this, please.
Sure.
How do they, are they required to put the other lamp post up?
I would say they are. There's the one house that doesn't have one, the one on the end does.
And how is this communicated to them?
Through this letter that he's given them.
Oh, Charlie's letter. Okay, all right. And have you seen the homeowners association agreement?
I'm not even aware that it exists. I got an email back from SciTech this afternoon. He said that they were going to check with the owner to see if they ever produced one. I don't know that anybody knows at this point. If there isn't one, there needs to be one.
So your letter will initiate the reaction from them?
Already has, I think, Emmanuel, yeah.
So, the discussion on the tripartite agreement.
Right. The tripartite agreement has been completed and okayed by the town council. And it's ready to endorse and sign.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of disclosure, the record should show that I met with Mr. Fay and with Chris, I'll forget your last name, Chris, I'm sorry.
Reynolds.
We met this morning and reviewed the house plans that they had submitted.
Yeah.
At our last meeting, we discussed certain options that, and they were generous in accepting the suggestions that were discussed in their future design work for phases 2 and 3. So just to be on the record that we had the meeting, and Ken was also there.
All right, you got some documents for us?
Of course.
No, I can see that.
Thank you, Bruce.
So, couple of the comments from our last meeting. Ken confirmed that the tri-party agreement originally came from the solicitor. And there was a couple of items that you wanted added in there. One was the 2 years from the signing of the agreement, which Ken added on the first page. And then the second item that you were looking for was for the bank to do the work if there was an issue, and our bank agreed to that. And what we did was we added some language, Ken added some language in there on that second page for that from a previous agreement that he had. And then we just extended the time. It was like a 30-day time, but we did it to 90 days just so the bank would have the time to go in and correct it and to do the work. So those were the couple of items you were looking for last time. Ken added them. The bank agreed. Got the bank to sign off and to do it, and if, upon your approval, we'd put this in final form. Yeah. So, just with signatures and recording.
Is this your problem?
And who's the signatory for us? The entire board, or?
It says a majority of the board, so it'd be the entirety of.
Who gets put on the account? Is it the town manager, who represents the town at the tri-party?
The planning board does,
At all?
at all.
And you say Rich Bowen has looked this over?
Right.
Any questions from the board?
The only question I have is the last page. The date is long. It's a month into the future. Is that going to be an issue? Can we correct that here?
August 22nd. Well, it was notarized.
This manager, what's that?
Member.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that should have been previously. I can change August to July, I'm not sure how that happened, unless I'm looking left and reading something else.
Well, it's-
Would it be a problem getting a new version?
Absolutely not.
One way we could do it is have the planning board sign the blank copy and have the,
We'll have the bank sign and I sign.
do it again. You have a copy in the agenda book, the calendar book. It has enough room for signatures.
well, there was, let's see. I thought there was one in here. On the previous page.
There's more room in this version for signature.
Well, I just, there was the bank and and they've already signed this one.
Yeah, but they had the wrong date on it.
That's on a different page.
And what you can do is, I don't know, there's more room on this signature page for your
Mhm.
signatures if you want.
Well, I guess I would need a motion first.
George, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Second paragraph on the front page. Is there any reference to a date and booking page reference for the
Mhm.
mortgage that's referred to?
Yeah, I don't know why that wasn't filled in.
The bank, I understand, was looking for you to approve and sign, and they would fill it in and return the original document. So I'm not sure customarily how this is supposed to work. It's kind of a who signs first kind of thing. So if you would like to approve this, we will, and sign it, we will return originals with the bank's signature and booking page in, and obviously, I won't be doing an August projection in right August when I'm supposed to wait till I apologize for that. Wishing the summer away.
Does Mr. Molo have to go back and be re-notarized?
They have him at the bank, so I'm sure he has someone in the office that would do that for him.
And that is the right number for surety too, right? I don't have the worksheet here.
Yeah, that was the worksheet that we had previously come back for, and I referenced that.
Yeah, the number is consistent with my memory of it.
Mhm.
Tim, what are the terms of that letter that's referenced from the Bella Construction Company? It's just between Bay Point and Bella. What's in that?
That's the one that had the schedule of values that you wanted broken out with the detail. That's what I presented to the board the last time when we got approval. So
Okay.
that's that schedule of values, that reference how we came up, the ones we reviewed with the bounds and everything. So that's that same letter that I had presented to the board, got approval, that we reviewed. So it's just that document that
Okay.
came previously. Just so it'd be that.
You've got a copy of the letter, Ken, in your file?
Got it in the file, don't have it here.
All right.
Yeah, I had attached it last time. when I came with the-
I just didn't know that that's what.
Yeah, no, it's that, yeah, so it's that, I provided it last time when we came, just, the email
I'm
approval.
familiar with that, I just didn't relate the
Yeah,
two
no,
together.
no, that,
that's all.
yep.
Does Mr. Fay's signature come under the responsibility of the notary? No, you're not, the notary's not notarizing your signature, are they?
No, we're notarizing the bank's signature,
Right.
I believe. I'm attesting as the manager of the entity.
I mean, would he correct the address and initial it? Excuse me, the date?
I can do that, but I'm happy to bring back an original with the book and page reference enumerated on the document, signed by the bank, signed by me. The bank said typically that planning boards approve, they sign, the document has been executed by the bank, and then they fill in book and page numbers and return it, just so that there's not an executed document in suspense that happens or doesn't happen or what have you. So I'm happy to tomorrow return to your office, Ken, an executed document, we'll correct the dates, and with the book and page number on it, referenced properly.
I would just like to get the planning board signature tonight,
Yeah, I would too. Right.
since they're all here.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the performance security by lender agreement dated July 19th, 2018, with the required corrections on the date and the deed and book page number put on before resubmittal into the town
Second.
planning board.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You want more than one?
You only missed it by a month. Usually you miss it by a year. You don't usually miss it by a month.
I was working on an August projection. John was,
And mine's erasable.
Since they're also waiting for the signature on the special permit minor modification as well.
So they only get one signature a night?
That's the modifications we presented last week, right?
Modified again.
Got a start date figured out yet?
Starting to cut down trees, yep.
Yeah?
some site equipment on the property and just to get going. So we've got a half a dozen, 4
Should there be a date when we sign
NS's
this?
signs.
Says
We've got
June
3 people
19th.
that are close, so we're really excited about getting the project kicked off and,
The date next to our signatures is when Mr. Fay signed it, June 19th. Should we add a date below our signatures as today's date? That- Does that make a difference?
The date should be at the top of the first page.
On the signature page, that,
Well, the only thing,
Because the other signatures will be notarized from the other page. The minor modification.
I would think they'd fill that in when they go through the final paperwork. If it's tomorrow or the end of the week, or whether it's August 22nd. The minor modification, you say you were satisfied with the elevations that you viewed, or?
We discussed alternative means of achieving designs in which the garages are not so prominent.
Mhm.
And they have committed already the existing designs in terms of sales. But going forward, Mr. Fay assured us that they will take into consideration, well, speak for yourself.
We had a terrific meeting this morning, and so much of what we do is to take into consideration from a design perspective those that look good on the envelope and the outside, as well as those that function practically on the inside. And like the, at the end of the day, we're trying to satisfy a market that's looking to live in the development and the home that we're doing. So the comments and suggestions that were discussed this morning were terrific thoughts and ideas. We've got 5 units now that are in play. We will, as we have talked about all along, be back at various stages. This project's going to be going on for a while. The plans will morph into what we respond to the market looking for. And in the next round of design elements, we're looking to take into account ways to address the concerns discussed this morning and pronounce the fronts a little bit different than the way we had them. So we've already started. We had a late conversation this afternoon with our architect, and we're looking at different thoughts to still accomplish what we need to from the interiors, because that's where people spend most of their time, and to address some of the concerns discussed this morning with the pronounced nature of the garages. We think that as the duplexes come together, that issue is mitigated. As the units are married and stepped, I think they'll have a different look to them. But in our subsequent phases, we'll have quite a few single-family homes. I think the mix is about 50-50, single-family and duplexes, and we're going to expand our design concepts to include a little different look in mitigating the pronounced nature of the garages if we can. So we're looking forward to getting to that design.
Yeah, we had a mutual understanding that future designs will be brought to us for review before they get before they get too far along, both in terms of time and money spent on them. So Want to show it?
No, it just references the plan date of July 9th. Nothing.
What's the question?
That's the only reference to the modification is the plans dated July 9th. And this is,
You don't anticipate the lot lines are gonna have to change again, do you? Based on the current design?
Not in phase one, no. Based on current designs, we're comfortable that we've addressed a lot of the issues that were creating a little stress.
Okay.
Mark, in the interest of improved design results, I see no problem with moving lot lines. As long as they're within, within their own land, their own property. But more important is if a particular design that will be developed needs a little more room in terms of setbacks, I see no reason why the lot line could not be relocated.
As long as they don't take up any more of the golf course, I'll be happy.
So it's actually none of the actual golf course. You know, we pushed up the hill of a closed hole, and we're utilizing land that's not really in play using golf course.
Unfortunately, that's the whole area that I play in up there.
Okay.
Can't keep it down the fairway, so.
So that part I understand.
And this agreement too, Mark, is not affected by any adjustments to lot
Right.
lines. This is strictly securing the road construction.
Motion?
sure.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special permit minor modifications dated July 9, 2018, with no exceptions to the written document.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
George,
Aye.
does it reference the plans that are supposed to be reflected in the
Yeah.
final A&R, as well as
The,
the site plan?
Modifications shown on plans dated July 9th, 2018.
Okay, well, you haven't, those haven't been endorsed yet, right? The A&R hasn't been endorsed yet, right?
No.
Right, okay.
And it's contingent upon that happening.
Oh, okay.
Anything else? Hearing nothing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Do I have to sign this in front of a notary?
I think Jasmine will look at it on the tape. This is just a single-sided sheet. The registry of deeds only take single-sided, they don't take double-sided documents.
So, what's the purpose of this? That's gonna be added to this, it's two separate.
Right.
Sorry to sign this.
Yeah. Have Jasmine bring in again if it's necessary.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's where the double-sided doesn't work.
That needs to-
Something else for covenant release? Tri-party
You,
It's fine.
yeah, you need a release from the covenant that was recorded in the registry. Yeah, that's what this tri-party agreement takes the place of.
So is there another document?
There should be a document that they give you that releases that.
That I'll get from, okay.
You better ask him.
I guess you're all set.
One other comment that I was discussing with Charlie is previously I had a covenant on the property, so now the tri-party agreement's going to replace that. So talking with Charlie, he says I need a covenant release.
That's correct, release of covenant. Did you actually sign a covenant?
Yeah, so the covenant's signed, recorded. So now
So now you need a release of covenant.
get that through you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll come see you for that? Is
Yes.
that, okay.
Board should probably take a vote to release it.
Yeah, vote to, upon receipt of the tri-party, executed tri-party, we can come in and sign the covenant release.
Motion to that?
I'd like to make a motion to release the covenant based on the final signatures of the tri-party agreement dated July 9th, 2018, right?
No, dated July 23rd.
Amend that to July 23rd.
Tri-party agreement was the one we did first.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mike seconded it. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So, when you get that document executed, we can just come in and sign off on the covenant release. Sounds like a plan?
Excellent.
Perfect.
Who's gonna sign the release document? Mr. Buckman?
No,
The board will come.
Great, awesome. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Hope you really enjoy the balance of your summer. I don't think I'll be back.
I'll be back.
Chris will be back.
I'll be back. Thank you.
Chris, when you have a schedule with your contractor, if you're going to have any kind of a meeting, could you include me in that? Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you, have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye, Tim.
Now, we have a discussion and vote for zoning articles for fall town meeting. First on the list is dimensional standards.
these are articles that were requested by the Director of Inspectional Services, Dave Requena, so I thought I'd have him talk you through them.
Good evening, Dave Requena, Building Commissioner. So, I wanted to try to address a couple issues that were missed at the last town meeting, that were included but just never put forward, as well as a few minor housekeeping items.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, you in your handout, in your folder, there's, in the back, are articles that were under discussion previously that did not go through the last town meeting.
Multi-page.
That's it. Sorry, Dave.
All set? All right, so the first one is 535 outdoor storage. This was an ad that we had proposed. This is already in the bylaw, so these next few definitions are in the bylaw currently, they were just modified. These are sections that we use quite a bit in town for enforcement. Outdoor storage basically calls out all of the items that we have issues with, as opposed to just junk, which I believe that's how it's called out now. This is outdoor storage of junk, so basically 535 and 530, unregistered vehicle, boat, or trailer. Right now, 530 just says unregistered vehicles, but one of the large issues that we have in town is unregistered boats, unregistered boat trailers, multiple boats, multiple trailers, and vehicles together. So again, 535 and 530 are items that we use a lot, and this just clarifies it and better defines it so that when we have enforcement matters, we can...
Wasn't that addressed last town meeting? Wasn't that in there?
It was, but it just never made it into the warrant.
Oh, I thought it did.
No. So these items here have already been looked over by the board. Again, they just never made it into the warrant at the last town meeting, so we're just trying to put them forward now. 617 projections, that was removed, that was put on to de minimis, which was already approved. Frontage definition, that's something that comes up quite a bit. I mean, I shouldn't say quite a bit, it comes up often enough when we have a corner lot. Our bylaw currently says that you can only use from one side lot line to the center point of the arc on a corner lot, as opposed to using all of the frontage. So there's a couple of lots in town that I could think of off the top of my head that are not buildable without a variance because of that definition. I've worked in a few towns, and I've never seen it used that way. I've never seen corner lots counted as to the center point of the arc. It is used in some towns. I just figured that it would allow people that have lots on corners to use them.
I'm sorry, where are you?
That one isn't on our...
That isn't on the sheet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I don't see it.
Okay.
What would it get replaced with?
So what I have on here that was proposed last time, frontage definition. This says the property line dividing a lot and street measured from one side lot line to the other. In cases of corner lots, the total shall include the distance between both side lot lines and the radius measurement of the corner, if applicable. So all that really says is that basically you can use your entire frontage, whether it's a corner lot or not. Any questions on that, or?
Is that something that we should handle in two different ways as far as a new subdivision as opposed to existing condition? Is that gonna cause problems with laying out of new subdivisions, giving us undesirable lots?
It might. If I can speak to that, George. If you have a corner lot and half the frontage is on one street and you got a 90-degree bend and the rest of the frontage is on the other street, it's gonna shrink the lot width up. So you might want to give some consideration to the distance, a minimum distance between lot lines, so that you don't end up with that. The reason that they did it before was so that you'd have all of the frontage on one street to where you'd more easily manage the full width of the lot and get it the way that it was intended to be shaped. You still have that shape factor to deal with, but with the corner lot, it could shrink the front width of the lot down quite a bit. Not saying it'll happen every case, but it could.
I have the opposite problem on the outside of the corner, so I don't have much frontage at all.
I think it would be helpful to actually see some examples of it, of the, where it could be a negative situation.
There was just a variance for, I think, on the corner of Agawam Beach Road, where the frontage requirement was, the intent of the frontage bylaw was met, but he was caught up on the technicality that Dave mentions. It required a variance to, because it was what, 10 feet short, maybe?
Yeah, yep, something like that, but it had the lot area, it had everything, and we do have a lot shape factor in this bylaw already, that I think would help us with that.
We could do a little study of it, though, and show some examples of how
Yep.
that would apply.
Yeah, we could.
And I'm not opposed to it,
Yeah,
I'm just wondering how it could be abused, that's all, in drawing up a new subdivision, if that's gonna be, give us something that we wouldn't want.
Have to give it some thought myself, off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Other than possibly pulling the two lot lines in a little bit, it's the only thing I can think of.
But if we
If you connect it to the
If we
lot shape
enforce
factor.
the shape factor, then
Yeah.
so
And,
that's a protection.
yeah, and other towns have a shape number, which is tied between two dimensions, perimeter and lot area. And you can't get that number down below a certain value, and if you do, it doesn't meet the standards for the full width of the lot or the full depth of the lot, which was intended for a particular lot, say, give any lot dimension, 150 feet in width by 200 feet deep, there's a 30,000 square foot lot. Having a shape number would mean you'd add up the perimeter, and I think divide that into the area, and if you end up with, in the case of, I think it was Sandwich, you ended up with a number that was 22. If you ended up with a number that was smaller than that, you had to adjust the shape of the lot to get it so that it would fit that number. It was just a way of managing the shape, so you didn't end up with these real narrow lots or pork chart shaped lots that sometimes you tend to see, not so much today, but the one thing you might deal with, if we haven't already, would be a case that you had over on Glen Charlie Road, for the location of the circle, you know, the 150-foot circle that you had to have, the location of that circle was important. I don't know whether that got changed or not, but that would help address the issue. Remember, you had the lot, basic building area over here, and the circle that you had to place was way over on the other end, and it was separated by wetlands. So they managed to, get it in terms of the legality of the lot, but it didn't make much sense in terms of where the house was gonna be placed, which was the full intent, was to give it the width where you're gonna place the house.
if you use that for your, what do you use for a side setback after you've made the whole corner frontage?
Well, as it is right now, our bylaw allows the applicant to pick which one they want to use as actual frontage, front yard setback, side yard setback.
So this wouldn't affect,
It would have no effect on that. It would just allow, it would allow existing lots that are not buildable because of this without a variance. And, you know, it would have some effect on new subdivisions, I agree. But this is something that does come up often enough.
This case on Agawam Beach Road was on the corner of Agawam and Frankie Ave? Is that
No, I think it was Great Neck.
Agawam and Great Neck?
That was a case that went back and forth for a while. It went in front of the ZBA a few times. They had an existing variance way back when. That variance had lapsed. It wasn't acted upon. They came back for another variance. They got denied or they got continued, and they went back, and it was just recently approved, I believe.
That's right,
Yeah, so,
reinstituted.
I mean, that's a fairly recent A&R too, so I don't know how it got approved in the first place unless, without the frontage being measured this way. Do you see it, Mike?
Yeah, it's a fairly large lot.
Yes, the intent is there on that particular one. It's got almost enough frontage on both streets to meet.
And we're looking at a foundation area that's already there?
Did they clear that the lot that was cleared for cellar hole? Or is that the next one over?
there's houses on both sides of that lot, from what I believe.
But somebody dug a cellar hole there and then never built anything. Is that, he's,
I don't know. I can't answer that.
that looks like a
Yeah, it looks like a
foundation hole
foundation
with
hole,
plants growing in it. I don't know if that's the lot in question, though.
If it had a foundation on the lot, it would have been buildable without it, so, I mean, all the...
No, it was just the excavation, no.
I see, okay. Any other questions on that piece?
Yeah, I have to think about it.
Okay.
This is just to take it forward to public hearing.
No, I
So the
understand.
process before town meeting, and you make a determination about how you want to
Yeah,
present it.
the words make sense. I agree with the principle, the concept, I mean, but you could have a lot that's very small in terms of its lot lines, none of which would accommodate the zoning in terms of front dimensions, side dimensions. And by this approach, you are, am I wrong? You're letting a very small lot now become buildable. By
Go ahead, Emmanuel, I'm sorry.
creating, in a sense, an artificial front line.
There's corner lots everywhere. All right, I mean, there's corner lots on every street, every block. From what I've seen, this is not a very, it's not a very usual requirement. There's other things that we could put into the bylaw, I'm sure. I mean, there's other ways that we can make sure it isn't just a little narrow lot with a wedge at the end, which happens sometimes. It does happen. This is just preliminary. So, I mean, if there's other things we can do, I just don't want to put the time into this without knowing that you guys were,
Yeah.
you know, so.
For my-
It's early. I'm happy to explore more options. In order to prevent that, I can have conversations with Mr. Rowley. I'm sure we can come up with something. Other towns have them. As I said, I just want to make sure you guys are on board to move forward.
David, I don't object to the idea. I just want
Okay.
to understand it better.
Yeah, sure.
I think one concern I have is just, so we're taking the total frontage between, of two roads. There has to be some proportion. I'm more concerned on new development. I think there has to be some proportion of frontage on each road. Because you could do a wacky setup here If you took 50 feet off of one road and 150 foot off the other road, or 130 feet off the other road, you'll end up with this pie-shaped configuration. And under a new development, you could squeeze another lot into this scenario just by working the math,
Is the,
which is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's the landowner's right. It's that, we're not gonna get, I think that you're not gonna get proportioned properly. And I'm looking at this lot here, and if that is a foundation, what it ends up doing is, where this foundation was dug, it pushed to the far left, as opposed to where I think it would have been better centered in this neighborhood on Agawam Road myself. I don't know what the objective here on this was, but it's hard to get the setbacks and get to the center of the lot on this corner. So I think by saying equal proportions on each roadway, 90 feet on each roadway, helps define the minimum lot size.
With the lot size and the circle that you have to draw in it for the buildable area, there's probably a good chance that that will be eliminated, Mark.
Right, but isn't David saying we're gonna eliminate the arc?
No, no. It'll still be, you can measure along the arc and it'll be counted as a part of the frontage. But within the enclosed perimeter of the new lot, you have to be able to draw a circle of the minimum frontage dimension. So if you're in a zone that requires 150 feet of frontage, you have to be able to draw a circle inside that enclosed figure of 150-foot diameter.
Right.
150-foot diameter.
Right.
If it's 150 feet of frontage, you need to draw a 150-foot diameter inside that parcel.
So
Go ahead.
you may have a picture that looks like this.
Right.
Here's a corner lot,
Right.
neither of which is 150 feet. But the lot line can go off on an angle, so long as you can draw the circle of 150 feet in there, you've got the buildable area that you were looking for because of the 150 feet you needed. So it's possible that you could add them up and still get that dimensional area. They might go off on a little bit of a skew, but you're still forced to put that circle in there. That controls the direction of where those lot lines are gonna go.
If I could just be clear, if a lot is measured, if it's a corner lot or any lot, if a lot is measured to the center point of the arc, or if you count the entire frontage, you could still make a wacky lot. It doesn't take it out of this board's purview. It just makes the requirement so that the applicant would not have to get he wouldn't have to go to the ZBA for any additional variances. But I mean, whether it's on a corner lot or not, you could still make odd-shaped lots. You still make wacky-sized lots, but you still need that 150-foot diameter. So I don't think this is gonna prevent anybody from making a wacky lot, and I don't think it's gonna create any new wacky lots. I mean, if it's a subdivision, you guys are still gonna look at this. It just would prevent the variance requirement, is all it really is.
Can I go back, may I go back to 535, or are we still talking about the corner?
Well, I think that, just in fairness to you, the decision that we're trying to come to tonight is, it's important enough to put on the fall meeting agenda, and to encourage David to do the additional research necessary to give us
Yeah, yeah.
options. So that's one of the takeaways for tonight, right?
Yes.
You want to know whether to continue plugging away at this.
Yes.
Because we'll only have an opportunity to meet with him about 3 more times before you get into that fall meeting zone, right? When is that? October?
October is the town meeting, fall town meeting.
Right,
And
so we
we'll have-
got 4 meetings left, so,
And what we have to do is set a public hearing date for the articles that you want to take forward to town meeting, or potentially take forward to town meeting.
Is there a question on 535, Emmanuel?
Yeah, do we want to consider control of the material of the fence or wall,
yes.
or specify what's not required, or what not permitted, or what should be permitted? I could imagine that the storage structures are within view of neighbors or streets, or do we want to specify material, or,
Well, so I have an existing question here. What is the zoning that this is applying to?
That's the entire town. So, I mean,
For all
you have,
classes of
you have
zoning?
parcels, that, I mean, there's a handful of parcels in this town right now that just have boats, cars, trailers, junk, pieces, washers, dryers, you name it.
But we're not telling commercial or industrial zoning to hide this,
so
are
this
we?
applies to residential as well, right?
It does, correct.
So are we telling Caterpillar to hide those tractor-trailer trucks on the Cranberry Highway?
No, if it's Caterpillar, they have the proper licenses to do that. If they're gonna sell motor vehicles, if they're gonna sell heavy equipment, they have the appropriate licenses to do that. I'm not going to enforce against someone that has the appropriate licenses. This is for people that are not following the bylaw.
Right, okay.
There's no enforcement required for somebody that's not breaking the rules. If they have the right licenses and everything is in order, then there is no enforcement required. This is for the people, and I'm not gonna mention any names, but there's places over on Cranberry Highway right now that are just out of control.
Absolutely.
And I have no enforcement action against them. I get complaints on them all the time, and there's nothing I can do because we don't have it in the bylaw. Our bylaw says auto. As in, what's underneath there, 530. And if a person's got 12 boats that are falling apart in their yard and old trailers that are rusted, I can't enforce against them because the bylaw only says auto. So these are just little things that I have to deal with every day. Please keep in mind that these items are used mainly, almost always, in cases where enforcement is required. It's not something that we just go around if somebody's got items in their yard that are neat, orderly, that are in compliance with the bylaw, then these issues won't even come up. It's basically almost always for enforcement.
Well, I certainly agree with it. The issue I have is that I think it needs to state all sides in public view. And I would vote for used corrugated steel corroded sheeting, something. For preferred fence material. I think the fence, I think something generic on the fence material, I think it needs to be addressed, but it has to be consistent with the character of the neighborhood or the character of the environment.
Okay. I can't speak to that. I mean, if it's a fence over 7 feet in height, it's gonna fall under the building code. If you guys wanna say it needs to be a wooden fence or a chain link fence, or, that's entirely up to you. I'm not sure what the legal aspects of that are.
Do we have to decide this tonight?
Nope.
So
Nope.
the idea is good. I personally accept that we should go forward with it. Let's think about it next meeting, when you come in, have something to contribute for the, in other words, you could have a residential area where suddenly you see a chain link fence with vinyl straps on it. So I think we should have some way of monitoring what one will see. But the concept is great, yeah.
Okay.
What is the enforcement penalty on that?
If it falls under zoning, it would be $300 a day. If there's a building code aspect, it would be an additional $1,000 a day.
So if somebody takes a boat and puts under a temporary garage shelter, are we concerned with that? Do we have to put that behind a fence?
If a person takes a boat and puts it under a temporary garage shelter,
Yeah, you know,
One of those,
a
like a
canvas
carport?
Quonset hut type of shape.
there's probably 100 different scenarios that I could play out right now, but if it's one boat and it's registered and it's in a carport, no, it's not a violation. If it's an unregistered boat in the front yard, it is a zoning violation. If it's 2 unregistered vehicles in the side yard, it is not a zoning violation. If you have a 3rd registered vehicle in the side yard, it is. So there's, I mean, there's, what's the premise of the question, I guess, is, I mean,
Well, I see that this could create a larger challenge for you. You know, if you're gonna make an issue with 3 cars in a yard, and the property owner's gonna conclude it's gonna cost me $8,000 to put up a fence to hide this. If they don't, so here's the options: get rid of the car now, put up the fence, or pay $300 a day. And are the residents that are in violation of this going to be able to come up with any of those 3 resolutions?
I'm in court often, Mark, okay? I assure every one of you guys, if I've amended these items, it's because I have to deal with them quite a bit. I've amended these to make it easier for enforcement because of what I see and what I deal with every day. Whether a person can afford the $300 a day, or whether they're gonna put up a fence, or just
Haul it off to the junkyard.
haul it off to the junkyard, is entirely up to them. But I need something to tie a violation to. I need to be able to begin enforcement action, and if I can't begin enforcement action, and if I can't follow through with enforcement action, then that violation is gonna stay there.
Okay.
It's gonna be an eyesore, it's gonna be a blight. So these, I've amended these in a way to make it easier to enforce and to allow people to correct the issues that we have in town. And there are many. I get many complaints every day. So I have complaints that come to my office that I can't do anything with. People come in and complain constantly, and I can't do anything because our bylaw is not specific enough. Or in other cases, a little too specific. So that's how I've geared these changes, in order to make it easier to move forward with these enforcement actions.
I think they make sense.
Any more questions before I move on?
Small point, when we, last time we spoke about this, under 530, we included the words camper. Is it important to put into this one? Or does it fall under vessel? Not to be too picky, but
No, I actually think that's a good idea. A camper,
what we added to our 530 zoning section, we added the words camper or trailer.
Okay.
It's in red lines, but you have trailer in the new version.
it does say trailer, and if it has a license plate, it would be a vehicle if it has a license plate under DOT. But I don't think it's a bad idea to add the language, because we do, actually, right now, currently, we have, I can't tell you how many issues we have with campers and people living in campers around town. So that's probably not a bad idea.
It's better than living in the woods.
All right, do you guys have the 2 tables, lawfully existing lots in residential districts and then lawfully existing lots in village districts? Okay. Those 2 tables were created based on a survey of existing lots in the residential districts and in the village districts. You know, as you can see, 0 to 5,000, 5 to 10,000, and 10 to 15,000 square feet. What this does is I went through and I took a survey of 45 houses in residential districts around town, varying residential districts, and then another 45 houses in varying village districts, the Onset Village, Wareham Village. And I took average FARs and average existing setbacks. And what this does is that this allows us to use the averages with existing buildings on existing lots. Instead of making every existing building non-conforming, it'll allow us to approve more projects without the ZBA. We have too many projects that go in front of the ZBA over minor things that they really should be going there for. It could be, just as an example, it could be a house that was constructed lawfully on an 8,000 square foot lot, but it was completely legal at the time. Now, our bylaw has changed, and now that the R30 requirement requires 30,000 square feet instead of 8,000 square feet. So this person that just wants to put a little addition on their house can't conform to the new setbacks, but the house was created lawfully, so we're, in a sense, allowing them to go by the original setbacks or the averages for their area. And then the FAR requirement, just, that's the average floor area ratios in those areas, and that just keeps, it keeps people from being able to build a mansion, mini mansion on a 5,000 square foot lot in Swifts Beach. Now, you can't build an 8,000 square foot house on an 8,000 square foot lot. And that is a complaint that we hear often enough. Again, it's not something that we hear of every day, but we do hear it often enough when we get these big houses down on Cremisa, Swifts Beach, areas like that, where people want to build on the water, and they build this giant house, and then everybody around them now lost their view, they lost a lot of things. So, I mean, it's just complaints that we get, and it allows the districts to be more even.
Should we include the height of a building in that same average?
Average height?
So you don't get a 3.5-story building in the middle of a bunch of cottages?
Could. I don't see why not. We have a pretty average height requirement, pretty standard height requirement across town. It's almost always 35 feet everywhere you go. The R30, the MR30. I mean, a lot of these districts are all 35 feet. Most of the applications that I see don't come close to the 35 feet. Usually not in those areas.
But there has been instances where somebody comes in and builds out to their maximum setback, and they're 5 feet from a bungalow, you know?
Yep.
And they go,
That's actually a good point. So one of the things on here is 0 to 5,000 square feet. Most of the lots in all of these categories were created prior to our zoning, 1951, 1952. Those lots technically don't have any zoning requirements. So if you have a grandfathered lot in those districts, they can build right to their property lines if they wanted to. We don't have anything that keeps them from doing that, because it's a grandfathered lot that was created prior to zoning, and people can build out their entire property. This allows us to put a restriction on that property so that you do need to meet the minimum setback requirement, and you can't build right to your property line.
I mean, the lot size cannot start at 0, though.
No, but there are lots that are 1,800 square feet.
It's smaller than that.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Talking about a 450 square foot structure.
Tiny house.
I don't even know if it's inhabitable at 450 square feet.
You can fit,
Are you saying the smallest average lot is 1,800 square feet?
those are tiny lots, but I mean, these are the averages that I've taken from those areas, what are existing in most of these areas already.
Would you get the other setbacks that you needed for water and sewer on an 1,800 square foot lot?
In the village districts, you might.
For private water and sewer.
Oh,
So-
private water and sewer? No.
Yeah.
So if it's an 1,800 square foot lot, by law, they are not entitled to build a new house on an 1,800 square foot lot, just to be clear. If the house is existing on an 1,800 square foot lot, I had one today that I just referred to the ZBA on a 2,200 square foot lot. The house is existing. It's there. But if they want to put an addition, it could be an 1,800 square foot lot, but the house could be pushed right up to the road. And if they want to put a little addition in the back, this gives us a setback to go by, as opposed to the R30 zoning district. If it's an existing structure, they have to abide by the R30, MR30, whichever district it's in, they have to abide by the current requirements, once that house is built.
There has to be an existing structure on this size lot. So the question is not new construction on this size.
The only way you could build a new house on a small lot in Massachusetts is you need at least 5,000 square feet and 50 feet of frontage, in any case. Anything below 5,000 square feet with less than 50 feet of frontage requires a variance.
So the reason we're addressing 0 to 5,000 square feet is only for lots with existing homes.
Yeah, you're not gonna create any 5,000 square foot lots. So you may
Right.
find one that's in existence, there's still some around, but.
This is gonna come into play mostly when people wanna add on to their house. You have these little cottages that are on these lots and they wanna put additions on. We send application after application after application to the ZBA when they really don't need to go there. That's,
I think
That's
Now,
my
the one
take on
on West Central, was that a variance to do that? That was a tear down and rebuild, right?
West Central, which one?
No, it was a little narrow house and a little narrow lot,
It was a special permit.
yeah.
It was because there was a house existing there.
Hmm.
You know, so, I mean, without
It
getting
does
into all
blend
the
right in, I
technicalities
mean-
of the law, if it's existing, it has protections on the Mass General Law. Chapter 40 protects existing structures. This just allows us to better regulate them without sending everybody to the zoning board of appeals. Because, I mean, if I own a house, if I own a small house on a small lot, little summer cottage, and I want to put a tiny little addition on the back of my house, then I have to go to the zoning board of appeals, I have to spend all that extra money, waste all that extra time. In a lot of cases, these people don't know that they have to go to the zoning board of appeals, so they apply in May or June. Now, by the time they get through the ZBA, if it gets continued, and you go through all that process, now you're in,
next season.
you know, so these people are wasting time to put on a little 8-foot addition to their kitchen when it isn't always required. These houses are there, they're already constructed, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, these houses are already constructed, and these people want to put small additions, porches, things like that. Those are the cases that we send to the ZBA all the time, and this will just give us a baseline to build off of, as opposed to having them comply, having them have to comply with R30 or MR30 zoning districts, which would be 20, 10, 10. We still have building coverage requirements. That stuff is still there. This is just to prevent the amount of applications that we refer to the zoning board.
How did we treat decks?
Just like a structure.
It is considered part of the structure.
Does that suggest that areas like Swiss Beach, Pinehurst, Parkwood, some of the areas up off of Glen Charlie Road maybe should be given separate and distinct zoning districts, similar to the Wareham Village and the Onset Village District? Because what's in the back of my mind is, all these areas where they were put either in the R30, the R1, not R130, but MR30 districts, sort of overlaid over the top of them, no matter what was there.
Mhm.
Unless you're going to literally enforce the bylaw that says you can't build on anything less than a 30,000 square foot lot in Swiss Beach, having the underlying zoning as 30,000, 150 feet is meaningless. Because those cottage areas, which were summer cottages years ago, if we're going to say that they are what they are and they're never going to change, why have them in the R30 district or the RMR30 district? Why not create a special zoning district for that area and do the type of things that Dave is talking about? Similar to what was done with Wareham Village and Onset Village.
I
If
think
it's
the
an
only thing
existing
that would have,
lot, if I could just comment to that, if it's an existing lot, it doesn't matter what district it's in. It could be in the R130, the R30, the MR, it doesn't matter. Under Mass General Law, those lots are still protected as long as they were created lawfully and recorded at the time of creation.
unless they're in single ownership, that's what it would
If
affect.
it's in single ownership, it's still grandfathered. If it was in common ownership, it's still grandfathered, it just has a higher requirement, 7,500 square feet and 75 feet of frontage. So this doesn't change the grandfathering requirements. This is just a way to regulate, to better regulate, like I said earlier, in most cases, existing structures that people want to add to. In the R130 zoning district, if you live in Shangri-La, that entire neighborhood down there, where the houses are so close together, they're 5,000 square foot lots, but now it's 130,000 square foot zoning requirement. It's 100 foot, just a front yard setback's 100 feet. Most of the cases that I refer to the ZBA in the R130, the entire house is in the front yard setback, let alone having a side and rear yard setback. And this just allows them to add on to their house. They could have a 15,000 square foot lot. It could meet all the setbacks that it would have met back in the day. It's just now that we changed our zoning requirement in that area, most people in Shangri-La, if not almost all, in that existing area, cannot meet any of the setback requirements. It's actually rare that I get an application in that Shangri-La area where an applicant meets the zoning requirements. It's a 100-foot front yard setback. Most of those lots are only 50 feet deep. And we send every one of those to the zoning board. So, in my opinion, what I see over the years is if you make it that difficult for people to do these things, then a lot of these people just go underground. And that's what happens.
Well, at one point, and I forget who was the inspector at the time, he interpreted it as your setbacks for what was ever in place when the lot was created.
Our bylaw doesn't say that, Mr.
But
Chairman,
that's how
with all
it
due
was,
respect.
that's how it was interpreted.
Right, well,
So it wasn't a problem, you know, it wasn't the problem that it is now.
Yeah.
So if you've got 130,000 square feet, you don't need to put your shed 10 feet from the property line, you got plenty of room. It's these little small lots that need that little extra forgiveness.
exactly, and that's all this addresses. This doesn't address new parcels, it doesn't address anything over 15,000 square feet. It's lots 0 to 15,000 square feet, and those are the lots that I see that we notice, that we send to the ZBA constantly because they cannot meet the requirements of our current bylaw. And it's, I just want to add, it's at no fault of their own. These are changes that the town has made over the years, and now they own houses that conformed at the time and now do not because of changes that the town has made. So,
The only, I think this is good policy, but the one thing that is lost is the opportunity for public comment. Because if you live in a neighborhood where you say, I'm happy with these small cottages, I don't want anyone building closer to my property line and encroaching on me. We're giving them the ability just to pull a permit, and the abutters don't have any public comment now. Without actively seeking out who's building in the neighborhood. Coming through the zoning board, they have an opportunity because notification has to be given to the abutters, right? So you lose, so if somebody, you know, if a retired couple decides, you know, 1,000-foot cottage is why they moved to Cape Cod, and then the person to the right, left, and back of them decides they're gonna bring everything in closer to the property line around them, some folks would be opposed to that, because they bought under that condition that it was protected in that way. So, you know, I'm all for, I'm all for streamlining all this bureaucracy. I don't think that we you know, if I was to guess, having sat on that board in the past, that 90% of what gets presented in front of them for these variances is getting approved. I mean, I can't imagine there's great opposition, and when it doesn't get approved, it's probably because of public comment on it. Because they are building too high, or they're putting a second story on it. So, that's the only thing I see lost from this. So, you know, we can cater to the minority that might have a concern, which I don't think we necessarily should, because they could be here tonight to comment on this. So, or we'll see what the response is at public meeting. If there's a lot of opposition, then they'll say, you know, they won't pass this at the fall meeting. But I think it makes great business sense. And it has good engineering back, solid engineering behind it.
How, take Shangri-La where, in the older section, not the White Island section, but the earlier section of Shangri-La, lots up there were 6,500 square feet. They were 65 feet wide by 100 feet deep. How do you address, Dave, if I came in as an applicant and said that I had a 6,500 square foot lot, but I also had another 6,500 square foot lot side of it, do I now get 2 building permits
No,
under this scenario?
nope.
Okay,
So
how would that work?
if you have, so now you have to get out of the zoning bylaw and you go to Mass General Law. If you have two non-conforming lots in common ownership, side by side, you own them both, and it's only two under 7,500 square feet, they become one lot for zoning purposes. That's the way it's treated. If they were both, yes, it becomes one lot, Emmanuel.
Common ownership.
Common ownership, or common control. If you have two lots that are in common ownership, that are 7,500 square feet with 75 feet of frontage, yes, you are entitled to 2 building permits.
And it even describes what common ownership is, what level of relationship, so, I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot of zoning that's outside of our bylaw that we could talk about all night. But this is just for, again, in most cases, neighborhoods that are already right to the property line. You know, and in those lots, I have had people tell me in my office that they could build right to the property lines. They say, okay, well, I own this lot, it's 5,000 square feet, 50 feet of frontage, it was lawfully created in 1941, and they say, I can build right to my property lines. And there are some people that are willing to push that envelope. I usually try to talk them out of it because of access. If there's a fire, you know, how far you need to be from your neighbors. But there are people that are willing to push that envelope in some cases, and this just allows us to better regulate. Again, please keep in mind, these things are created because of issues that we see often. These weren't just things that we made up. I have to type a lot of letters because of 2x4 additions on the back of people's houses, or porch additions, and it's just my personal opinion, I don't feel like it's necessary. If I owned a house out there and I wanted to put a little deck on the back of my house, which happens in a lot of cases, I have to go to the Board of Appeals because I'm not 100 feet from my front yard, or I'm not 30 feet from my side yard. And that's not, if I built that house, and I built it lawfully at the time, that's not what I signed up for. You know, every other house in my neighborhood has the original setbacks, and now you're asking every house in the neighborhood to meet the new setbacks, and they cannot. They just simply cannot meet the setbacks. So every project that you're proposing in those areas, every exterior project in those areas ends up at the ZBA. And the people who don't want to go to the ZBA end up doing the work without permits. And that's just the reality. Those neighborhoods, we have a lot of violation calls in those neighborhoods. A lot of people doing work without permits. And it's enforcement heavy. And we're enforcement heavy because we make it too restrictive. And in areas like this, I believe people should be able to come in and pull a permit without having to go through the zoning board of appeals if they meet the original requirements or the average requirements of their neighborhoods.
Dave, does it address the issue of an existing structure? My thought is that,
Article 13 addresses existing structures.
what would this additional information to go in the code, which would allow them to do this by just coming in and asking for a permit, does that just apply to existing structures? So even if I had a 7,500 square foot lot in that zone, I should still need a variance if I didn't have a building on there, I would think. If I had a single lot that was non-conforming in terms of size and didn't have a building on it, I would think we'd want to still throw that to the building, to the zoning board.
Even though it's a,
It would
it
be a
was a legally
grandfathered
created
lot.
lot, it should be a building permit.
So,
Maybe.
well, if it's, okay, if it's a grandfathered lot, and it was created prior to zoning, this protects them from being able to build to their property lines. This helps the town so that these people cannot build to their property lines. This gives us a requirement. If it's a grandfathered lot, it goes back to the date the lot was lawfully created. And if it was created, in most cases, a small lot was created prior to zoning in this town, and they don't have a requirement. They don't, I can't enforce any front yard setback or side yard setback or a building coverage or an FAR because we don't have it. It doesn't exist. This gives us a requirement to attach to that application. Where
It
right
allows us to be more stringent than Mass General Law.
in some cases, yes,
Without the bylaw, what could they build on that 7,500 square foot lot?
whatever they want,
Quarter to corner.
corner to corner.
So once the bylaw is in place, we then have an enforceable bylaw.
Correct.
But he can't
That
come
lot-
back and sue the town and say, you're more stringent than Mass General Law.
Well,
The
there-
lot would have had to predate in 1951 for that to happen.
1951. If it's after 1951, there's already a regulation in place. We already have the requirements of what was in place. We have a list of what was in place for every zoning district all throughout the years as it changed. So if a lot was created in 1966, I know what was in place in 1966. As long as there was never a structure on that parcel, then that lot has to abide by the first, or by the regulation that was in place at the time it was lawfully created. Lots after zoning are protected. Those aren't the issues. Grandfathered lots are not the issues. This grandfathered lots that were created prior to 1951 can be an issue sometimes because people could maximize. This gives us a regulation for the lots that were created prior to zoning, and it gives people that are in those neighborhoods a little bit more leniency, like in the R130. As I said, most of those lots are only 50 feet deep, and there's a 100-foot front yard requirement. So we're making everyone go to the ZBA when it's really not necessary.
So what happens in the case where you got a 7,500 square foot lot, your area coverage is limited to 16%. So if they come, it's too late to do math in my head. So 7,500 times 0.16. So they're limited to 1,200 square foot structure. If there was a 1,000 square foot structure on there now and they came with a proposed 200 square foot addition, and stayed within that 16%, they're good to go.
Right.
But if they came to you with a 400 square foot addition, they're outside of this requirement.
And they have to go to the zoning board.
Now they're back to the zoning board.
Correct.
Okay.
So it doesn't keep people out of the zoning board, it just keeps the
Yeah.
districts more in line, more average. Keeps everybody equal in a sense.
Right.
David, the FAR values, are they an average of,
I took averages from 45 houses in each one of those districts.
seems to work?
It worked. I mean, it seemed pretty consistent throughout every district. I did Cremisa, Shangri-La, Swift's Beach, and Parkwood. And then I did all the village districts, Wareham 1, Village 2, Onset 1, and Onset 2. Anything else?
I think Wareham Village 1, the lots, minimum lot size is 4,000 square feet, isn't it?
This was last year. I couldn't tell you. I don't know off the top of my
We were
head.
talking about lot sizes, but, yeah, okay.
So again, the question is just to push this to fall meeting, right?
Yeah.
This is all we're deciding?
Yeah, we'd go through a public hearing process and,
Well, I'm still, if I get the green light, I'm still gonna have to write this all up. Well, I mean, these items are already written up, but there's a couple other little items that I'll have to write up, and that's basically what I wanted to present to you today. As long as I get the green light, I'll put the work into it, write it up, and I think we'll be talking about this again.
yeah, we'll have to go through the public hearing process, so.
Sure.
May I make a motion to give David the green light?
Sure, if you want to.
Second?
The motion should be to hold a public hearing.
I was
That
just gonna
too.
say, what's the green light mean? I don't see
That
that in the
too.
zoning bylaw.
I'd like to make a motion to approve forward movement
To hold a
building
public hearing on
commissioner
this.
to hold a public hearing on the amendments to the bylaws presented to us this evening, as stated in the handout.
Second.
Well, there's more in the handout too, but we know what you mean. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Now, the next one is,
The Tremont Nail Factory Redevelopment Overlay District. The Wareham Redevelopment Authority is asking that an overlay district be proposed to allow reuse options at the Tremont Nail Factory. It conforms to the vision and may be problematic under existing zoning. Noted that that the Tremont Nail Factory is in the Wareham Village 1 district. Uses prohibited in that district include health athletic facilities, apartments and mixed-use buildings, conference centers, hotels, light manufacturing, accessory food and beverage, and marine connected use, which makes it tough when you have a kayak launching ramp on the property already.
what is accessory food and beverage?
Since the building
Well,
inspector is here, maybe he can clarify.
well, the one thing that, you know, back when we talked about the zoning changes, we were trying to encourage mixed use. And then when this came along, it was taken out of the villages where we were trying to encourage it. So I could never figure out why that happened.
I think one of the accessory food and beverage ideas is in the new malt manufacturing facility on Kendrick Road, where they have a bar. They're selling product that's manufactured, that's brewed with their malt as an accessory use to the manufacturing operation. And under the Wareham Village District, that would be prohibited. Since they're in the industrial district, they've been allowed to operate that. And when you're trying to preserve historic structures, setbacks and other dimensional standards don't necessarily apply. And possibly too easy is the existing regulations on residential density, which allows 1 unit per 2,000 square feet of lot area, which doesn't necessarily conform to the vision that has been created by the study. So, in the overlay district, suggestion would be to include the Tremont Nail Factory run it out to Route 28, where the existing Wareham Village 1 district lies, which would cross Elm Street and go to the railroad tracks. Then to, the allowed uses would be to add that list of prohibited uses, plus specify artist studios and the controversial issue of marijuana product manufacturing as uses that have been brought to the redevelopment authority for potential use within the Tremont Nail Factory.
You can't put it there, you're within 500 feet of a school.
That's a possibility. And then to have performance standards that there would be no dimensional standards so long as the historic building elements are maintained in conformance with the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation. That no restrictions on allowed uses so long as noise, air quality, odors, vibrations are all within acceptable limits. And other performance requirements that may be applied with limits and penalties agreed to between the project proponent.
So does that mean we have a new spot for adult entertainment?
There'd still be prohibited uses within the district.
Says no restrictions on allowed uses, so.
I think my reservation on approving anything there is I don't think the road infrastructure can handle any great amount of traffic there right now. That bridge is down. That is such a tight corner to turn around
They're gonna
there.
fix the bridge,
They're gonna fix the bridge?
sure.
Was that a real answer or a sarcastic answer?
No, that's a real
Seriously,
answer.
That bridge is gonna, it's not gonna stay like that forever.
Yeah, eventually,
When will the bridge?
eventually it'll fill
when
in
will the
with
bridge
mud
be
and we'll
fixed?
go across.
The bridge will be fixed when the money is applied to the reconstruction. There's already been money appropriated to the reconstruction of the bridge.
So what's our best guess? 2 years?
Could be.
I think a lot of these uses can, right on, but apartments and mixed use, where would you put apartments in there?
That was one of the vision plan that was created by created for the town by Union Studios and under a grant from Mass Development, suggested that they, in the short term, that a rental use of the metal building would be used to finance slow improvements to the project, to the site. And then the longer-term vision was to have residential development be allowed on the site in place of the steel structure to provide the funding for further improvements to the property.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating, did you say a metal building?
The metals, there's a metal space building on the property.
There is now?
Yeah,
On the right-hand side, when you pull
Really? In fact, that was,
built in the late 70s.
yeah, that's
when
where
they,
they built the last nails, were in that building.
When they stopped pickling the nails, they went to soda blasting, and that's when they put
Don't remember seeing this.
I think one of the things we can do is take a tour of the site as well, too, for any of you who haven't seen the buildings or the inside of them. We can do a little site visit. Be happy to show you around.
Can we go inside the main structure?
Yes, you
Main
can.
building?
Yeah, you can.
I understand the funding aspect of it, but a little hesitant on the marijuana product manufacturing.
Well,
I don't want to see that end of Main Street
those guys are
overcome with
looking
a
for
stench
every,
of...
every available building in town.
I mean, you
ABRs.
walk Main Street now, every apartment house you go by, you're gonna smell this. No.
Or you go to a stoplight, you can smell it. Down in front of these, somebody's backing up or whatever, that's just a way of life now, George. no matter
But
where you go.
a product manufacturing site could multiply that tenfold with,
Yeah.
I don't know,
It'd be a great place for like a little mini brewery, them things are big time now, tasting rooms. I think Plymouth's got a couple.
We have a couple of proposals in, one for a distillery, one for a pottery studio.
Yeah.
One for a fish farmer. There are a variety of uses that could be put in here.
Seems like kind of a mixed bag of industry, though. Aren't you looking for like a cohesive grouping of businesses to create an environment?
yeah.
Why would you want a fish farmer next to a distillery, next to a pottery?
You probably wouldn't, but unless there was fresh food on the menu at the restaurant that's there as well.
You eat pickled fish, you'll need the jars from the pottery company.
From the pottery, everybody's supporting
And
everybody.
the
at that
apartments
point.
will be sleeping on bed of nails.
On top of a rail bed.
Ken, how much of that property is actually in the flood zone, current flood zone?
About 65%.
And all of this development would be outside that?
The new development would be outside the floodplain.
Not including the existing building. By that, I mean the original factory.
All the original factory is within the floodplain.
But that metal building, is that in it also?
I believe that is just outside the floodplain.
Might be nice to see just some existing maps of what's there and how much is developable land to see what would be possible to put in there.
As in, what we can do is send around the vision study then. I think that might be a good starting point, is to send around the vision study, which has that information on the National Registered District, historic districts that surround the property, and the floodplain and environmental issues associated with the property as well, too.
I think some of the buildings are in the National Register also, right?
The whole complex is in the National Register, except for the steel building.
Yeah. Like I said, I'd be hesitant to commit to the marijuana section of it until we learn more about what they plan to do there, but.
I agree, and I would also question the appropriateness of light manufacturing, and what does that mean? Don't we want to bring people into the town? I mean, it's a great area, but not too accessible at the moment, although the idea of connecting it to the river front or, behind Main
Boardwalk
Street.
that connects
boardwalk.
downtown to,
That all sounds appealing. I mean, the town needs people, residential, commercial, but light manufacturing and marijuana production.
I agree. I don't think that's the place where it belongs. We have plenty of
I mean,
industrial
if it's one of
parks
those,
now.
if you don't even know it's there when it's in operation, then fine, but
But then
I don't see how you can not have an odor problem.
And what happens?
that's true, sure. But the point is, it's a great area. Ken and I walked through it a year ago, right, Ken, when it was.
yeah.
And I think it has great potential as a river walk or it could serve as an attraction
Yeah, a
to
destination.
bring people into the downtown.
Spirits and.
Help revive, but marijuana and
I could see a.
Well, that's the
small
funding
boutique
mechanism for the site.
The marijuana is the short-term,
When you say manufacturing, when you
approach.
say light manufacturing.
Short-
say
what do you
like,
mean short-term?
A lot of these niche
Like
shops.
taxes, short-term, they'll go away
Niche
someday.
shops, you know, they make.
They're
maybe
like taxes,
ties,
they'll go away someday.
Custom belts or something like that, leather shop, you know, something
Oh,
small like
no, I
that.
think that was from.
That's tolls.
Oh, tolls, yeah.
And what does light manufacturing
One of
mean?
the greatest
What-
features they had.
Yeah,
was
that's one of the issues was,
company store. Those girls.
You know, is it a t-shirt company like Soft
also
as a
loyal
grape?
customer
it,
there.
it,
Consider
it
that light manufacturing. is
it could be a jeweler.
Yeah.
It could be a canoe maker.
That's not something I'd want to go and take a walk and end up there. If there were a restaurant, if there were
Well, we'll
a
have
venue for a concert, or,
fish, the fish guy can fry you fresh fish.
well, no, fine, if he, yeah. But
There's potential there, there's no doubt about it.
no, marine related,
When the
yeah.
country store closed,
Well, the microbrew there would, you know, they
Would do
They
well.
generate foot traffic and,
Yeah.
yeah, with a little restaurant and stuff.
you know, somebody making earrings or.
So the question for tonight is, would we consider rezoning this area?
Right, put an overlay
Well,
district
not,
in
not
there.
even, would we consider it and then put it onto the fall meeting?
Right.
Here's the one thing that I think is important. I think we've done enough discussion about marijuana. I don't even think it should be entertained. I firmly believe that. We gave all the options. This could have been brought onto the table when we were working onto the zoning. But we gotta give this town some type of answer on that property. We've owned that thing for so long and promised the repurposing of it. So if you have prospective tenants for that, I think it would be helpful to walk the area and see what, you know, these prospective tenants would be able to accomplish with that. But I'll hold my reservations in saying, I don't think we should rezone anything because the infrastructure can't handle a very limited amount right now coming down into there. It's just, we got one-way traffic going in and out of there. You know, if that bridge is 2 years off, we should be talking about it 2 years from now.
2 years, that building's probably gonna, that building's, needs help now. You know, that's been, how long have we owned that building now, Charlie? 5 years, 6 years?
Oh, well,
In a while.
Since 2004.
Well, when you get older, you lie about how fast time goes on.
2004, 14 years.
Only thing, like you talk about the marijuana, you know, dispensary in there or whatever, manufacturing. I don't like to see apartments in there. When you put that label apartments on there, there's a couple of small parcels of land there. I can see some apartment houses springing up or something like that. You know, I don't think that's a place for people to live. I think it should be more of a destination.
But I don't see how much new can be built there if you're saying 65% of this is in the floodplain.
Well, the thing is, if you look at the map in the sheet here, it's gonna go right up to 28. You know, so you got the diner and all that property there. That's all potential. Soon you say apartments, that's potential for a development.
well, I think the intention of mixed use and to apartments is to generate a population down there that would walk Main Street and use Main Street and even with the potential of even using the rail or.
You don't want the people there, we want people to go there. The people live there, how much money, they're not gonna spend anything. You know, you want people to go there as a destination. You know, go down and have something to drink or something to eat, or, you know, buy something or whatever. I think that's what you guys are trying to do with that place.
Right. That's what the vision is.
Well, I think that, you know, perhaps the six of us are talking in the same direction of how it should be used. I don't think it should just go right to public hearing, because there's no time to debate usage down there. We should have at least some public discussion here before town meeting on what the town would like to see for the use. We should invite the folks that live on Main Street and, you know, who knows? It might be something clever like, let's make a cranberry museum. right?
The business is going down the tank.
Well, I don't know. I mean, considering they're hold a
Museums.
good part of the population, they might say, that's what we'd like to see it used for.
Museums don't make a lot of money.
Costs a lot of money to run museums.
I don't know, somehow they got a grant for $750 million to expand onto that museum up in Salem, Massachusetts.
750 million?
$750 million.
Tell me where that pot of money is.
I don't know, it's all
It's
being
all the
spent up
witches,
there.
that's what it is.
Was that a witch museum?
No, it's, I think that it would be
I got
helpful,
a
at least for
donation
me,
to make.
to hear from some representative, or some representative sample of the community on what they think it should be used for. You know, what does the senior population think it should be used for? What does the historical committee, at least open it up to, before we even make a decision on usage, let's just hear a little bit of input on what it should be used for.
Well, I'm sure you visited other cities or towns where you do have a walking main street, where there are restaurants and attractions, stores, specialty stores. I think that's the vision behind this, is to make a destination where you go in and walk through different places, maybe souvenirs to an IPA, you know.
One of those information and I can go
I'll
right
start
in the
short of saying a blunt, but.
Yeah, I think it's a
I don't
home
see what
run.
I'm saying.
I mean, but to bring that type of volume and exchange of personnel, and you need parking, and you need to be able to get them in and out of there efficiently, and I think we just would need to understand what that purpose is so we can make those other accommodations. And I know this is very successful. I grew up out in the Berkshires. I can go Main Street, Stockbridge, and see people just park to walk. You go downtown Newport, Rhode Island, people just park.
People
to
go to the
walk.
western part of the state to go look at leaves.
Right, so if you, in,
Just
the
lost a
town
picture.
definitely needs some form of destination event.
Well, not only that, but that complex could anchor that end of Main Street. I
Yeah.
mean, there's really no reason to walk past the bank at this point, from the opposite end of Main Street, because there's nothing to see.
Sign
You anchor the other end of it, now you can start developing from that end back toward the center,
Right.
creating that downtown environment that we're after.
So can we,
John Churchill.
I mean, the first two items that we discussed here, right? Dimensional standards has to go up to public hearing, the Tremont Nail Factory.
But
Can we
in-
get some public
reference to the-
feedback here? I think it belongs on the fall meeting at some level,
John Churchill never worked.
but
on
I don't want to even start to suggest zoning
I don't know where she got
without
this.
getting some public input.
Well, that's what we have the formalized public hearing for, to get that public input.
Yeah. When would that
But
be
this-
scheduled for? Two meetings out?
Yeah, we could do it in August.
I mean, this is the best effort we've had since town bought it, to redevelop this property.
Ken, haven't you had some public meetings since the EDIC got involved with this property?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What kind of feedback have you got back from, so far, the public, the general consensus?
General consensus is make something happen.
What about the event that they have there, the Meet Me at the Tremont?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have tickets for that if you want to buy them.
We're going to. We went last year, it was a great event. And
Isn't it?
they did
Yeah.
have some good information there on what the vision was.
Over 200 people there at the,
Yeah, and everybody seemed genuinely excited at the idea of it being a sort of destination type of environment. I
I've always
agree, I
said
don't
the
think
mill
for
would
like
make a great function
manufacturing
hall.
and the apartments, I don't think they belong there.
Yeah, we got support, Ken. Start the process.
all right. Have a vote for public hearing?
Like to make a motion to vote for a public hearing in the month of August to review the future usage of the Tremont Nail Factory
Second,
District,
Overlay district.
overlay district.
second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? TDR in 10 words or less.
Transfer of development rights. That's 3 words. How about that? I took something out of the master plan that suggested a couple of things to do with transfer of development rights. A new map with more strategic sending and receiving areas. A sample project that, where we can try to show how this works. A user guide that explains the TDR process. And consideration of advanced features such as
Thanks, Dave.
a bank,
Hi, David.
incentives, allowing the transfer of commercial space, and a long shot, which is the partnership with neighboring Carver on a TDR program, which also has land owned by common owners of land in Wareham.
Why would you transfer commercial space?
If you wanted to concentrate development of commercial space,
Partnership with neighboring Carver. That must have been put in there by ADM.
I just think the same thing.
Yeah. We'll give you the dump.
I want the dump.
Make a nice ski hole.
Do you have specific landowners that are interested in this?
no, I don't.
So this was resurrected by the selectmen?
Yes.
And what was the driver behind that?
And that if we had a transfer of development rights land bank, essentially a place to allow people to buy and sell development rights, that we'd have more participation by people that could afford it, which would be like ADM.
Do you know of any place where they create a bank where money's exchanged for these things? Have you encountered that anyway?
John DeVillers tried to set up something like that. I don't know of anyone at this point.
I was just wondering how you set the value to something like that.
Yeah, part of the issue is that
And who keeps score?
it's like cryptocurrency, yeah.
Yeah.
I got some swampland you might be interested in.
We're gonna hinge you some Bitcoin and say, this'll get you 1,000 feet of retail space in East Oshkosh.
Who would manage this process? Who would manage the bank in the town? Is that your department?
It'd probably be through the town administrator or the redevelopment authority.
So, transfer and development rights, a zoning mechanism that uses real estate market focused to permanently protect land. The main idea is that the community can encourage development where it wants by allowing property owners to trade the ability to build on their land. Wareham already has a TDR bylaw that can be improved. So what is the restriction on the bylaw right now that we want to improve on?
The sending and receiving areas are overlap, and they strictly deal with residential units. It's a complex bylaw. And unfortunately, the way bylaws go, most times I've seen the more complexity in them, the less they're used.
Who manages the current bylaw? Who manages the current bank?
There is no bank.
There is no bank.
But a TDR exists, but there's nothing in the bank right now.
You have sending areas and receiving areas, and it would require someone wishing to transfer rights to iron that out with who's ever got the rights and whoever wants them. They'd have to iron it out amongst themselves.
It's a way of increasing density. For example, if I had, what's the minimum? 5 acres? I think it's a minimum. of 5
Yeah.
acres.
I think it's 5.
If I had 5 acres of land that I could divide into, say, 10 half-acre house lots under the current zoning, and you had land that only allowed 2-acre zoning, by negotiating with you, I could sell you my right to build 10 house lots on my 5 acres to you in exchange for a permanent restriction that I would no longer have the ability to develop my property. I'd have to keep it as open space or present it to some sort of a conservation area.
You're 2 acres.
Yeah, my property.
Charlie, you can increase the density of the smaller lots?
Correct.
Yes, you could.
So
But
basically,
is
you're
that
buying
not
rights.
contrary to the zoning regulations, to the dimensional?
Well, what you've done is you've taken away development rights on another parcel of land.
Right, but
So you have the same amount of development within your town,
I know.
but
Just
it's
in a different
distributed,
place.
it's distributed in different ways. And that's
Yeah.
why the sending and receiving areas are so important to be mapped out. You think about where you want that increased density
Yeah, but
and where you want to preserve.
could that allow me to build 2 houses on an R60 zone, residential zone?
If it was a receiving area, yeah.
Oh, so receiving areas have to be identified?
So I guess one of the questions I would have is, are you asking us to redefine the sending and the receiving areas? Or,
Yes. That's one of the steps.
okay.
Uh,
I think at least it goes beyond myself, it may go beyond the capabilities of the board, is to really look at a 20,000-foot level of what these sending and receiving areas would look like. Can we get those folks that worked on the master plan to give us some grant money and energy to make a recommendation?
The initial thought behind this was, and the goal behind it is you're building the same amount of units without the same amount of infrastructure. You're not building 2 miles of roadway in R130 to get to that 5-acre parcel. You're building it where there's already a road and town water and town sewer, and in doing so, you're preserving that remote piece, so it isn't developed. I think the reason it hasn't taken off is, I don't think they thought the densities were generous enough. And, there was another little glitch in there that we probably should address, not that it even matters, but the future turnover of that protected piece, and because I think the density that we allowed was 1-to-1, right? Eventually?
Well, for the net developable rights that were calculated through the process.
Which means one developable unit out here was worth one over here, but you weren't building roads and infrastructure to get.
How are the receiving areas ascertained? I mean, who determines that?
As determined by the regulation itself at this point.
But
When we,
how
when
you
we
adi- how you
chose
define
them, we tried to pick a couple of scenarios where it wouldn't just apply to one person, one large landowner. Tried to leave the door open for smaller landowners to get into. I think,
How successful has Carver's been?
Transfer of development rights isn't a very popular way of doing real estate development. Typically, the most successful ones are those where there's actually a landowner that has more than one parcel of land and doesn't want to build the infrastructure and wants to get the development rights. So puts a conservation easement over a parcel of land and takes that development rights and puts it into the new parcel, the other parcel of land. But in terms of market, the sale of that development right to another developer doesn't make as much sense, because the developer is going to want to take the profit margin from the units that they're giving up. But the one who receives those development rights, development units, also wants to make a profit on those as well too. So it potentially increases the cost of the housing in the transfer of those development rights. And therefore, it doesn't provide the kind of benefit unless it's a special situation.
So we're spending a whole lot of time and energy managing something that's not really worth it?
It
Well-
doesn't sound like anybody wants it.
one proposal was, or one identity, it wasn't a proposal, was you take a cranberry grower with all this upland. Now, either they cut in roadways and make infrastructure and build houses, or you take that density and squeeze it down and make a village with multi-unit apartment houses and stuff like that. And then,
Yeah,
that's the thought behind it. And I think we drew it up, the original, that way, but we also created a couple other sending areas so other people could, for lack of a better term, smaller growers could possibly use it.
I know very little about this. I'm somewhat a little skeptical that something that's been dormant and not worth any energy has now resurfaced itself. It makes me believe there's some master plan that none of us know about, that as soon as this thing is executed, it's gonna be rolled into action. I don't think that's the
That's the
case at
feeling I
all,
get,
but that's what it's coming across like right now. So, again, I think a public hearing would help us say, I have donor land, or I have receiving land, this is how I would use it. So simply announcing for some public input on this, if the room remains empty, then I think we move on and just push it off to the spring, fall meeting.
I know we did quite a bit of work on this before, did workshops and public meetings, and it would be helpful, because nobody's really used it, but they haven't told us why, so what are we
Yeah.
missing?
Exactly. If we get an attorney that shows up here and says, here's the problem with it,
Now, you say they used the Plymouth one,
Yes, apparently they did.
so
Who were the
we
parties?
can look at that and see what's different about theirs that makes that workable.
but are there two particular parties that you can state that exchanged in that Plymouth relationship? Just
No.
something we recognize?
No, I can't.
Oh. I guess what I'm having a hard time seeing is it would be easier if you show me on a map, that piece of property was exchanged for that piece of property, and this is how the town benefited from that. So where there's no example to state, I'm having a hard time envisioning how this would work, other than, you know, I can't help to think that we preserve, you know, hundreds of acres of cranberry or farmland to trade off for a greater density in downtown Wareham somewhere. That's what I'm picturing in my mind right now. Is that what's happening? So I get this perpetual preservation of farmland, but are living
For one
with,
thing, before you get yourself all twisted up, you're not gonna preserve the farmland because you can't do nothing with it anyway, because it's wetland.
well,
Well,
is that
it's
always
open
the
space.
case?
It's the open space that's worth the money, not the farmland.
Okay.
You know, because the farmland we get around here is 99% cranberry bogs, and it's worth,
One thing we don't have, and you know it's in other places, is what they call an open space incentive district, where if you had 20 acres of land, you would get an increased density in 10 of it in exchange for keeping the other 10 in perpetual open space, either to be managed by an association. It's similar to a cluster bylaw that you do with a
I was
subdivision.
just gonna say, our cluster bylaw kinda does
Same
that.
kind of thing, except you don't
Basically-
necessarily need a subdivision to do it.
Yep.
You could do it with simply the area, and you pull your density in so that you're reducing the infrastructure costs that you're talking about in exchange for saying, okay, I won't develop this percentage of my property. And that keeps it all in one owner, rather than dealing with trading in the
The
TDR.
thought behind that, Charlie, to take that one step further, when Crane's Landing went in, the great master planners was, basically, that's what they did. They did away with a lot of the infrastructure, winding, meandering pathways through the woods. So you did away with a lot of the infrastructure for upscale homes. You know, that was the idea of it. And what happened was, the market wasn't there. What are they putting in now? They're putting modular homes in there now. You know, whatever the market will bear. You know, the concept is there. But the thing is, it doesn't, financially, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people.
Well, they
Or
are
not
still,
the right players.
I mean, they still have
It's 4 or 5.
minimum square footage size, whether it's
some-
modular or stick-built,
There's some
doesn't
big
matter.
houses going in there right now.
Yeah, there's some small houses going in there too.
No, they gotta be at least, I think, 2,500 square feet.
I don't think so.
I think,
Yeah, because that's ADM's neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Crane Landing. They're under the same bylaws as the neighborhood I live in. It's 2,500 square feet is the minimum.
So, again, my recommendation is just put this on the public hearing. If we don't get input on this subject, I think we got more important things to push to the fall meeting right now. If two parties come in here and say, we're gonna horse trade our properties with good reason behind it, but
Well,
we need this
could've
legal
worked on Fay
mechanism.
when he was here, but he already had his plans on doing the golf course, so.
Hmm?
We could have had him move down to Rose Point or Blackmore Pond. Build us other units
at the
down there.
at the time that this came up, we had a bunch of freeze plans put in place, which would have, what are we looking at, 1,100 new house lots?
ADM was just starting to grow. Wareham was scared of what's happening in Plymouth now. What is it, 1,200 homes up there?
That
Yeah, we were
project's
looking at one
enormous.
up the other side of Maple Springs. So the TDR was, that was the answer. Hey, we can encourage them to move it down here instead of sticking away out in the woods, which is gonna cost them a bundle for the roads and everything else. That's where a lot of it came from.
This is where they wanted to
That's
form
where the
their, a
thought
new
came,
township,
right.
at the intersection of the three towns?
No, that's something
No,
that's.
this was, they were looking to protect the zoning they had, because there was thought,
Yeah, I mean, to me, we'd be better off as a town to participate in expanding the infrastructure to get to those open lands, as opposed to trading all this off. Why do we want to create more density in already dense areas?
But now you're talking, that's private land. So you're gonna put infrastructure on private land? You can't do that.
I don't know why we can't do it. We're the beneficiaries of the tax money that comes out of the private land.
well,
It's
It
money
would-
that will return itself in the next 50 years to the
it
town.
would,
100 times over.
if they didn't have the ability to transfer, it would take longer to, it would take years to develop that much land. And now, you know, you're looking at solar arrays and other uses, earth removal. You're seeing all kinds of other uses
Lift
taking
removal
place.
is out of control in this town. And that's something that,
Those trucks.
Everybody looks the other way. I mean, they're just hauling this town away. You know, Plymouth gets cash for it, Carver gets cash. Rochester's really put their foot down on earth removal. But Wareham, yeah, you got a hill over there, we'll take it away for you. We'll dig a pond, no problem. Haul it away for nothing. Town sees zip. Zip. That's what we should be putting some.
Have we gone far enough afield yet, Ken?
I think so.
But I guess, yes, put it out there and see if anybody wants to come in and talk about it.
All right.
Now, to have a public hearing, you have to have some sort of a bylaw to suggest, right?
Yeah, we have to have some kind of draft. So we'll start with what Serped had suggested in the master plan. And except for the user guide, use the idea of a bank, of more strategic sending and receiving areas, and incentives, and allowing the transfer of commercial floor area as well. So you have the full range, and you can cut it down or cut it back as much as you want, or deal with whatever aspects are most important to you.
Is there something else in there in your suggestions too?
Yeah, last time we had discussed West Wareham zoning.
Yep.
And my recommendation on that one, because of the response we had last time, was to have a West Wareham zoning map study committee with residents represented on the committee. But that's only my suggestion, my recommendation, and I didn't know which way the board was feeling on the rezoning.
Well, our meeting never took place. I think when you and I last spoke, we were going to study current use and apply that to the map. Where there's conflict between the
Map
zoning
and the
and the
the
actual
land use.
uses.
and we have that information in the Serped study that shows the differences between the two. But it just seemed that even that was potentially controversial.
Well, I mean, in the agreement, the map is not representative to what actually exists. There has to be some alteration to the map because of what was allowed to be built in those zones. But now you're talking about further expansion or changing of zones.
Well, maybe that's probably what we should do is have one zoning change that makes what's on the ground conforming.
Right. That should go to fall meeting.
Wareham Crossing, Wareham Marketplace, I think it's called, and the Walmart corner. Change the zoning for what it is. And then if you choose to go on to addressing the industrial land across the street, it's a separate vote, it's a separate discussion. Because I think that's part of the confusion, is they think, when you look at the map we had, it looks like we're adding all this commercial space, and we're not. We're identifying what's already on the ground.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you do have to keep it as two separate proposals. Now, at town meeting, we're asking for a vote to make the map representative to what actually exists now. Yea or nay? Okay, second question is, this is the new proposed zoning and the benefits and for that, you're asking, should we have a West Wareham study? So we're asking for volunteers?
Yes.
Okay, any volunteers in the audience? Okay. Any volunteers at home?
Charlie Rowley. Charlie lives in West Wareham.
So do you.
Well, I live in West Wareham too, so you can count me in on that, but I think that, I almost feel that we need to, not necessarily handpick, but you need a representative sample between business and resident on this.
Well, as far as that goes, I think it's a small enough area where you can have a good discussion as a public hearing without
Going to a
Without-
study committee.
multi-committee hearings and workshops.
Yeah, I would agree with
We
that.
could keep it simple.
I think we just need to have a nice presentation up there to say, here's
Mhm.
one version, here's the second version, here's the third version of what this can look like.
Mhm.
So, how quick, you can do this on your computer, right? You can
Yeah.
overlap what you're proposing
Right.
based on feedback that's coming into your office and what,
Yeah.
prospective businesses that could move into those areas. If we can look at that next meeting. So I think each one of these items gets followed up on next meeting, but this particular one, we're looking at a map and saying, question one, here's what we're gonna bring into town meeting, done and done. Put it on the shelf for October. And the second,
Did we reorganize?
No, you didn't. You want to?
I'm just thinking, how many articles are we gonna have for fall town meeting? I think the vice chair should take care of these.
Mike?
I'll bring a pillow. All right,
I mean, you take them through the process, and they don't have to necessarily be acted on in October. It could be that some of these require some further discussion and
mm-hmm.
continue on.
That could, that's probably a fair observation, that some of these aren't gonna be ready for town meeting in the fall.
it seemed to me from the last town meeting that each individual committee doesn't see everybody else's list. And when this all kind of gels together, there ends up being 40 items in here. And we're thinking ours are priority items, and everybody else is thinking theirs are priority items. Is there some way to get a pulse check from Claire on how many articles are getting presented at the fall meeting?
If you want to have that as part of the consideration, we can get an estimate.
I don't know how y'all felt, but this thing gets exhausting about an hour into it, and you know, particularly at the last one, the school was such a pressing item that got presented right in the front. It almost should have been pushed to the back, and it should have been the last item, because at that point, everybody's just,
Burnt out.
well, they're all fired up over this school thing, and they're not focusing on anything else right now. So, are there more school items that come up in the fall?
They'll be back. You gotta understand though, our town meetings, you get a lot of special interest. People will come in for one item. We've had days, people walked out, once they got what they wanted, walked out, didn't have enough to continue the town meeting. You know, that happens too.
Well, and, I mean, some of this rezoning in West Wareham wasn't addressed because a member of the Board of Selectmen didn't get her way, so she made a motion to adjourn, so we didn't get to the zoning articles. And they've languished ever since, so.
That's what it, Judge?
I believe so.
Does it? Thank you very much.
When's our next call?
Next is the August 13th, I believe.
Yeah, change to the 13th.
Changed from the 6th to the 13th, right? Yeah,
That's
what I
right.
thought.
It's going to be on the 13th. We were granted an extension on the time to public hearing And so we were able to change it to the 13th, our regular scheduled meeting, rather than push it to the August 6th.
Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Second.
I would just,
Third.
I would just warn you to study up on the solar bylaw between the now and the 13th. Motion's been made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned at 9:30.